stuff.
You got this. Hey, thanks, Shelley. Appreciate it. Is this okay, Shelley?
No.
All right.
What happened?
Are the board members ready here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to call to order the Lower Paxton Township Authority meeting for Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021. First item of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Ramsey. Everybody please rise.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Mr. Ramsey, thank you. All right, first item of business. The excitement of the minutes from 8/24/2021. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes?
I did.
You did.
I did.
Well, Mr. Zumas, if you had a chance to review those minutes, then I feel pretty good about it. So,
I
do you
move
want to
that
make
we
a motion?
approve the minutes
Well,
for August
let's.
24th.
I think Dave Ramsey has some comments on the minutes.
Oh,
On page 2, bottom line, authority must contribute to the upgrades under township capacity. This has to do with the Woodridge Interceptor at Progress Avenue. It says the authority must contribute, and it says 1.6 billion.
That's too much.
I thought, I was hoping.
I'd say just a little bit.
We can make a motion on the floor if you would to change that to 1.6 million, please.
Okay.
That's a typographical error.
So, Mr. Ramsey, are you making a motion to approve the minutes with the change to page 2 to 1.6 million from 1.6 billion?
So moved.
All right. Mr. Ramsey has a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any further discussion? I think we can do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. Biggest part of the night. All right. Next item of business is public comment. This is a chance for anybody in the public. This is probably the most people we've had at a sewer authority meeting in many, many years. So if you would like to make public comment on anything that is not on the agenda, you may make comment. If it is on the agenda, trust me, we'll be getting to it before the night's out of this excitement of the municipal authority meeting, and you'll have a chance to make comment then. But if there's anything not on the agenda that you'd like to talk about, please come up to the podium here, give us your name and address, and you can take a couple minutes and tell us what you like to talk about. You have to go to the podium, sir, and give us your name and address. I know, sorry, it's just the way, we have to get it for the record.
Plus, we want that large crowd that's at home watching on TV to see you.
There you go. My hair look good?
You look great.
So I'm Ed Sternberg. I'm president of the States of Forest Hills Homeowners Association. I live at 2313 Forest Lane. Lived there for 21 years now. And I'm just wondering whether the issue of the storm water and drainage and things like that, I know it's going to be discussed this evening. I didn't know if that's something that, my question, I guess, is it something that we bring up now, in which case I'm going to bring someone up, or is it on the agenda to be addressed in 25 minutes from now? So that's my question. Or 15 minutes or 35 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I can
Yes, Mr.
answer
Weaver.
Ed's question. So
yes.
the email that you had sent with the plats
yes.
has been referred to the solicitor and the engineer for recommendations to the board. It was not in a form that could be acted on this evening, and there wasn't enough time for them to do an engineering and legal analysis. So you know, you can make any comment you'd like in the public comment, but at some point in time, when the engineer and solicitor are ready to make a recommendation to the board, either in January or February next year, when our next meetings are, then that would be at that time, and we would notify you, of course, when that item would be on the agenda.
Okay. There are a couple of people here, I guess, since I'm up here. Steve or Larry or Joe, do you, you guys know probably more about this than I do. Does anyone want to come up here and, since we're...
Feel free. Just give us your name.
Might as well get this over with.
If you want to make comment about it tonight while our township engineer and our solicitor are going to review it, that's totally fine. So feel free to come up, make a comment, whatever you'd like to talk about. So,
I can sit back down?
sir, you could sit down. You could stand up there if you want to get more TV time. We get great ratings for this meeting.
Not with me.
I find it really hard to believe you get great ratings.
Oh, we get awesome ratings, trust me.
My name is Steve Dayton. I live in the estates at 2403 Abbey Lane. That was a tough one. And I live across the street from two very sweet people, Keeling and Sis Liang. And I guess the reason I'm here, I'm an observer of what's kind of taking place with some of the storm issues that we're having in the estates. And specifically, there's an inlet that is above their home, on the corner of their property, shared with another property that they have found out after several failures, they are responsible to maintain this inlet, unbeknownst to them. And I think they've been there 8 years maybe, something along those lines. And I've witnessed several occasions, 2 to 3 being several, whereby their backyard has been significantly damaged because of stormwater that comes down the mountain. And my horse in this race is I live directly across the street. So that storm water comes down, gets into the roadway, has not invaded my property at this point, but has definitely invaded theirs. And I'm just a commonsensical guy, and this water comes from all the way up above the top street, and I don't know what the street is that goes up, big homes, and it comes down in a kind of like a water ride at Hershey Park, and it's supposed to enter this one single inlet, which is, when it rains heavily, it's incapable of doing so, therefore it comes down the hill. I believe the last time that we had, and I think Mr. Troutman was the responsible party for fixing the inlet or improving the inlet, because he's the other property owner, and please correct me if I'm mistaken. But now there's a larger basin that was built with large stones that feeds this inlet, that also has now a stone culvert that runs down this parcel directly across the street from my house. And at one time, and since it's been made or put in the ground, there has been water that has come down through that culvert that was built. So a couple things. One is, that seems to me as not being a system that works well for many, many years. And I'll take a step back. Before the Liangs ever built their home, there was a waterfall that would come down through the woods on a severe storm. So I understand that there's engineering. I understand that there's outside engineering that approves and evaluates land development plans for stormwater management, et cetera. But I understand that that's a formal process, logical, it needs to be in place so that we do things right in the township. That being said, it is very counterintuitive to me that an individual or individuals would be responsible for an inlet that ultimately controls water that gets into the township system and eventually makes its way out to wherever it goes. So I'm here to say that I don't believe it's fair for my neighbors to have to maintain an inlet up on the side of the mountain that collects water for some who knows how many homes above, roadways, and just run off the side of the mountain. So that was my purpose for coming this evening, and to hear what my other neighbors had to say if they so chose, and to put it before the the township to say I think it needs to be something that has to be looked at. I think it has to be done so in earnest, in good faith, and at the same time I understand philosophy of the township and why things are put in place as they are. But a homeowner shouldn't find out by surprise 3 times into rebuilding their backyard that they're supposed to be responsible for maintaining a stormwater inlet. So those are my comments.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any other comments?
My name is Larry Troutman. I'm one of the original developers of the estates of Forest Hills. And to add to what Mr. Dayton has spoken of, the issue is larger than one inlet. The issue is the crossover pipes from one street to another that transfers the flow from the higher elevation storm drains that have been dedicated to the township in phase 7, coming down through this pipe, which does have an inlet that he's referring to add any surface sheet flow that comes down the mountain. But these crossovers are transferring the water from one street to another street to continue on down to the large retention pond, which is like a 10-acre retention pond down in phase 1 at the lowest point. And the pipes from various streets come across, and there's been an easement put on those recorded plans, but back when this development was originally done 20, 30 years ago, there was no formal dedication to anyone what that easement or who that easement was in favor of. And so what we're proposing, of course, there's been a lot of changes in the law concerning stormwater management and everything since the original plans were approved and recorded. And it's kind of hard to comprehend the fact that a pipe creating a flow from one street to another across these individual lots would be the responsibility of those property owners. And that is part of the request that we've, through the HOA, Mr. Sternberg, who is the president of that association there, has asked that the township consider taking responsibility because somewhere down the road, 50 years from now, I'm going to be dead and gone. Everybody's going to be dead and gone, and somebody has to be responsible for the repair, replacement of those piping that are going from one street to another across these individual lots. The particular inlet that was referred to, we took it upon ourselves several years ago when that originally created a situation for Mr. Lang, was that it had become clogged with leaves, debris, because it's in a wooded area. And there was also some mud washed in there. We had met with township staff at that time to look as to how this situation on that storm inlet could be remedied, rectified, helped in some way so that this problem wouldn't happen again. And I think Mr. Klein was there and Randy Allen was there along with my partners for the development. And we determined at that time that we would lower the inlet approximately 2 feet, enlarge the sump area so that it would create a larger collection area. And then we also put in some riprap to slow down the flow of water that this channel was collecting the sheet flow from. And we did put in a temporary emergency overflow ballast area that he referred to in case the storm drain would clog again because it's an ongoing issue with leaves. It has, of course, corrected the washing of mud and rocks into that storm drain, because I've been checking it periodically, and that appears to be working now, and collecting the water and adding to the storm drainage that is being channeled down to Abbey Lane from Kensington Way. But there's also some other crossovers from Forest Hills Lane, across Abbey Lane at two different locations that are just emptying all the storm drainage for about 80% of the development into that retention pond at the bottom. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Have I explained what we're really trying to
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty well there, sir, but thank you for the comments.
okay, very
Yeah,
good.
thank you. Any further comments? Judge Tully?
Bill Tully, I'm not a judge here. Just a property owner and a citizen. Bill Tully, 2308 Abbey Lane. I've been a resident probably among the first dozen houses that went into the estates, and we are at the bottom, the grand collector of all water. And that magnitude has increased from the time we started. Again, I'm not here to offer any opinions on what needs to be done up above. Obviously, that's going to be left to engineers, but I do want to bring to your attention my concern. And this goes back, and the best I can estimate is 5 years, because ever since the pandemic, I can't estimate time before then, because it's all been altered in my mind. But we had one of those microcell. I mean, we've had hurricanes that have dumped a lot of water and brought that retention basin up to capacity. About 5 years ago, I forget, it was a microburst or whatever they described the event to be. The magnitude of water coming down. I mean, first of all, it looked like a tide was coming in through the pipes dumping into the retention basin. It filled up very rapidly. Matter of fact, it was the highest it's ever been. The overflow was clogged with debris that had come down through the storm and clogged the overflow, because the little hole at the bottom doesn't really take a lot out. And then the causeway on the far end is grown up with trees. The trees' roots have raised all the rocks, so it is no longer an escape hatch. It got to the point where the water was about to breach that would be the western end, and that would be the southwestern end. It was probably within inches. That's when I called Dauphin County Emergency Management and was concerned that if it breached, it is an earth levee, literally millions of gallons of water would be dumping across, filling that creek and taking out the bridge and probably some of the townhouses on Wimbledon. That's how much water was there. And I was concerned about getting someone out to maybe open up the causeway or something else to take the pressure off. They sent someone out from Lower Paxton who were very nice. They arrived at the scene. We hiked through what I hope was a right-of-way, and we didn't trespass. And the expletive that came out of whoever it was from Lower Paxton said, "Dear whatever, I'd never realized anything this big was back there, because it looked like Lake Gitchigumi." And fortunately, it was about that time they were in contact with emergency management, said the cell had moved and the water was going to stop. But literally, we came within inches of a catastrophic problem. Nothing has been rectified since that. We're a microburst away. More and more development, more and more runoff. We're playing with fate. What I'm hoping is that your engineers will take a close look at the overall capacity and also put it on the list. I was concerned that no one seemed to be aware something as big as that retention basin existed in this township, let alone anyone inspecting the facilities that would allow for the safe overflow of water when it gets to that level. I mean, for the first 10, 15 years, I would personally go down and clear out the debris stuck on the grill on that hole. And now that I've got one knee replacement and I'm avoiding the second, I don't hike down there anymore and do that. But if it's not attended to and it's not brought up to what the design wanted, and it's been filling up with sediment as all the mud comes down every time. It keeps the grass nice and green when it comes in from all the fertilizer, but I'm just really concerned that if a close look isn't taken, there'll be a disaster down the road, because if that water does get unleashed, I don't think Paxton Creek can handle it. So that's all I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you for your attention, and looking forward to working with you to clear up the problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. Appreciate it. Any further comments on this matter? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Joe D'Amico, 2302 Abbey. I live right down from Bill. I was only made aware of the situation. I have an easement across my property with my neighbor, Lou and Ashley, only this weekend, so I've been trying to, as fast as I could, spend a few hours here today trying to bring myself up to speed as to how all was transferred in. My only comment for tonight is, I know that the engineers and everyone and the solicitor will be looking at it, is given our circumstances in this neighborhood with that mountain the way it is, I would ask you to consider the unique circumstances of our neighborhood as it relates to the mountain, the amount of water coming down the public street, which is right in front of my house. There's a drain that goes in, so in my humble opinion, the water from the street, the public water, drains through my drain on my property and into the basin that Bill was talking about. As Mr. Nate pointed out, I'm just keep it simple from my understanding, is it seems to me that's kind of a public water that I'm servicing for the benefit of everybody, and I'm personally responsible for it. And given the magnitude of the issues in the neighborhood, I would hope the township would consider that each homeowner on an individual basis, piecemealing repairs as best we can afford, is not going to benefit the township overall, particularly with the overflow concerns and things that seem to be adding up over time here, versus the township and its resources and abilities to resolve what's becoming an overflowing issue. Sorry. But that's all. I just wanted to share that. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Any further comments?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, based on the comments we received tonight, I'd recommend that staff and the engineer, before we get solicitor involved, don't want to incur legal fees, but if it's okay with the board, I'd like to at least get authorization tonight to have the engineer and I and Tim and Randy Allen meet with, so Ed is sort of the president, start with Ed, get a group of the residents that are interested, so we can sort through some of the engineering and legal issues and make recommendations to the board.
I don't see that being a problem there, Mr. Weaver. Any comments from any board members?
No, I would agree.
That would be fine. Why don't you go ahead and do that, okay?
Will do. Thank you.
All right, thanks, sir. Any other comments on anything else outside of that issue that's not on the agenda? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on for public comment, go to board member comments. Any board member comments? Wow, nothing. Not like a happy Thanksgiving or anything like that? Nothing?
Save
No?
that for
I was
the
saying
end.
it
Okay,
to
say
the
that for
end.
the end. All right, okay, all right, all right. See, look at this. Look at this. Look at this. We get done. You get your chance on TV, and then you just leave. I mean, come on. All right, let's go on to
We serve popcorn later if you want to hang around.
let's go on to the sanitary sewer fund. The first action of business is action on the 2022 sanitary sewer fund budget. Wow, there's nobody here. They left. We got LP's finest though in the back, so at least you're going to get educated tonight. We're going to talk about the budget. All right. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, it's my pleasure to present the 2022 sanitary sewer budget for the board's consideration. In typical fashion, I will just highlight the items that have changed since we first presented the draft budget to the board in August. Looking over revenues, under storm sewer reimbursement, this is good news for the sanitary sewer fund, and I'll explain more too in the stormwater fund. Our revenues have increased for 2022 with the storm sewer reimbursement, now that we are going to start doing our own internal storm sewer replacements to save money. So that is in the form of repayments for staffing and other costs involved with the stormwater program that we share services on. That is the only change from the August budget. So you have before you tonight $17,155,745 in draft revenue. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And again, no changes to anything on the expense side, sewer operations facility.
Oh, I'm going to go to expenses next. I just wanted to answer any questions that anyone would have on revenues first, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any questions on revenues?
If you want me to move that quick, I will really go that quick.
Any questions on revenues?
Keep moving.
All right, sir, go ahead. You're on to administration.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Management reimbursement, with the addition of our new finance director, assistant manager, Sam, he has provided his expertise in helping us restructure some of our management reimbursement items along with Jada and Brittany. So we did have some changes that is in your packet, structuring all the different payroll percentages. I won't bore you with all the gritty details. The amount did not really change in any substantial fashion, but I did want to tell you that there were some at least changes in the splits. The only other item that I need to bring to the board's attention is under sewer transmission. I did not receive the official budgets from Swatter and Harrisburg, which makes up about 40% of our budget. So I did call the CFO for CRW and the CFO for Swatter, and I got a verbal on what their rate increases are going to be for 2022. Swatter's is going to be 5%. And there's still some uncertainties on the pension reimbursements. We've been getting substantial reimbursements, but there's some pension issues right now, and we may actually owe more money next year. That is going to be determined with their audit. So right now, our budget is reflected with a 5% increase with Swatter and a 4% increase in CRW. No changes in debt service. So your total expenses for 2022, $18,516,656. Any questions on the expenses?
Any questions for Mr. Weaver? Seems pretty consistent with what we talked about, so.
And the capital improvements, we really haven't had any substantial changes there. For capital improvements, to continue our consent decree improvements, the total capital expenditures is $12,080,000. $80,600, excuse me, $12,080,600. Too many numbers. That concludes my presentation on the budget. If there's no questions before you approve the budget, I'd like to go over the rates, if that is okay with the board at this point.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll pass these out because I know it's in your packet, but it's kind of cumbersome to look at on the computer screen. So in typical fashion, we like to hand out the spreadsheet that's a little easier to read.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So board members, the only substantial change to the rate analysis that I've just provided to you again is really in the storm sewer reimbursement. So under storm sewer reimbursement, when you run the rate table and you run it out over 20 years, the storm sewer reimbursement amount basically increases your revenues each year to the point where your rate increases can stay steady at the 3.5% to 4% that the board has directed staff to do. So essentially, to sum up the rate analysis, as the board may recall, staff just requested two directives from the board if they wanted to keep a 25% target and what percent rate increase they wanted to project. The direction from the board was always keep a 25% target reserve and try to keep rates between 3% and 4%. So with the additional revenue from the storm sewer fund, with the storm sewer replacements, we were able to do that, and we are still projecting no rate increase for the 2022 budget. And you can see that We maintained a 3 to 4% increase over the next 15 years, and we still don't go red. So the program that we have from GHD, if you go down to the total reserve and then the target reserve, there's a red highlight that shows up if you go below that target 25%, and you can see there's no red. So we always maintain that target reserve around 5 to 6 million each year. So essentially, this is all good news. However, you will have to start raising rates each year to keep up with your capital improvements of the consent decree. One of the other things that we met with bond counsel recently and our financial consultant, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, so I just want to touch on this with the board this evening, but we're going to try to change this table a little bit for two reasons. A, if you go back, Mr. Chairman, to the summary sheet that shows the rate increases.
Yes, sir. You want to go to the narrative or
The sheet,
the rate projection?
yeah, the top one there that just has the summary. It should be on the last page of that. Yeah, go a little, page 5. Right there, yep.
Right here?
So if you look at the end of the program, I know we don't like going out 15, 20 years, but you can see your reserves, total reserve, go down all the way to the bottom there. At the end of the debt, when your debt starts lapping off, you see you have a reserve that goes up to $33 million. Well, that's not going to work, is it? So one of the ideas that I wanted to start kicking around with our financial consultant, and they agree so far, is why don't we start pushing this debt out 30 to 50 years? That's the life of the asset anyhow, and that's actually possible. So right now you're doing 25 or 30-year bond issues, and that's how your debt's been structured. Now that we're getting toward the end of the program, it makes sense to look at doing 50-year debt schedules. And what that'll do is that'll push that debt out. You won't have those huge reserves, and then you can spread out your rates a little more. So I think that plan could work. So I'd like to present that to the board in 2022 for
Okay.
the 2023 budget. And the other item that Mr. Gottschall brought up last year was we should start looking at rates holistically with storm, sanitary, and taxes. So what I'd like to do next year is do a new table for you to show what the rates are going to be for sewer and what they're going to be for storm, so you can see the total rate increases every year for both. I know we have separate agendas, and I'm not suggesting we change that. But when we talk about rates, I like to look at it on a holistic approach, as Mr. Gottschall suggested. That concludes my report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on the rate schedule, but it's all good news. For 2022, we're projecting no rate increase, and we will satisfy the board's directive of 25% reserve and 3% increase next year. Or, excuse me, 2023. Any questions?
Yeah, I think it's good that we're gonna have 3 years in a row of no rate increases, and we've been able to maintain the reserve the way we intended to maintain it and complete projects the way we want to complete projects. And looking at just what we're looking at today, not looking at pushing the debt out over a 50-year period from 30, still we're keeping our rate increases going forward in 3 to 4% range, which is
Not bad.
Which is is consistent with inflation, is consistent with the cost of living adjustments. So I think that's good. The other thing too is I would say that I'm interested to see the plan, and I do like the plan of matching your debt with the life of the asset. I mean, these assets are 50 to 60-year assets now that we're putting in the ground. Matching your debt with those assets does make sense. I'd be interested to see how that looks and how that debt plays out over a 50-year period.
And Bill, for those projected rate increases, does pushing out the debt have any effect on?
Well, yeah, it would.
Well, we don't know yet until we have the numbers run by Susquehanna Advisors on what that does to your debt service schedule over time. But the idea is that, yes, it would spread your debts, your payments.
It would have to. I just didn't
And
know.
then your rate increases would go down, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If there's no other questions, then the board.
I think the key to that is going to be the appetite of the market to buy 50-year bonds.
Yes.
30-year bonds. That's really what it comes down to.
That's absolutely right.
I mean, I would assume with a 50-year bond, you're talking about having a higher rate of interest than a 30-year bond, which might be advantageous for some people to take municipal bonds at a higher rate. But I think the key here is the appetite of the market to want 50-year municipal bonds. That is a long period of time. But if you look at what the federal government's doing, similar. They're doing similar. They're doing similar scenarios with federal bond debt as well, where they're pushing that out over 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
Bill, I just had a question.
Yes.
How long will it be until the sewers are totally replaced in Lower Paxton Township?
So that's a complicated question. So there's two answers to that. A is the first portion will be as per your consent order, because you have a
Right.
court order that you have to replace so much.
Right.
After that, that's really at the board's desire. I mean, you could replace the rest of it in the next 10 to 20 years. You'll have about 25% of your system left. So, yeah, you can certainly do it over a longer period of time, because the results are showing that legally you won't have to do it. But, that's really
But
the way your rates are
working.
going. With the size of our system, in theory, if you want to keep going, you could probably do it with little or no rate increase or very small rate increases.
I think the strategy that we took 15, 16 years ago was the idea that this is going to be a perpetual project. It's never going to end.
Right.
We're always going to be replacing sanitary sewer line.
Yep.
And once the project over 50 years is done, you're going to start all over again. So, yeah, it's probably a 50-year project to replace all the line, but it's going to be a never-ending project. That's why looking at the debt service over a 50-year period actually doesn't kind of make sense when you're trying to match your debt against the work that you're doing.
When did we actually start the replacement and responding to the consent decree? When did
So the first consent decree was 1995, so that was 27 years ago, 26.
Or-
And then the total replacement program started in 2004. We started
I
early.
mean, we
Yep.
were replacing lines before that, but
Yeah.
but we didn't go to the philosophy of complete.
systemically do it.
Yeah,
systemic
we were doing
replacement.
repairs for about 10 years, and then we started the replacement, total replacement. Yeah.
But total, 2004 was the total.
Yes. The official plan was approved by DEP in '07, but we did a trial study in Devon Manor. Devon Manor was our first ever sewer
Yeah.
replacement project.
Point being, we're almost
Yep.
30 years in for some of the older stuff.
Yes,
and that is gonna
absolutely.
start-
It's been a long process.
When we get through this, then it kind of will be time to do it.
Officially 26 years since the first consent decree in '95. Yep. If there's no other questions, then staff recommends a motion by the board to approve the 2022 sanitary sewer fund budget as presented.
Is there any other comments from board members on the budget? All right, hearing no comments, is there a motion on the floor to approve the 2022 sanitary sewer fund budget?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the 2022 sanitary sewer fund budget.
Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. Is there a second? Second?
Yeah.
By Mr. Judd?
Yeah.
You jumping in there? Okay, get in there, man. All right, we got a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any further comments? All right, hearing none. Let's do this by vote, by roll call. Could you do it? Could you do it, Ms. Smith?
Are you going to build up the tension here?
Aye.
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 Aye. The 2022 sanitary sewer budget is approved with no rate increase.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
$153 a quarter. Okay, let's go on to Resolution 2114, authorizing the destruction of certain records. I love this resolution.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. You have before you Resolution 2114, as the board is aware, is a standard requirement of the Municipal Records Manual, which the authority has adopted to follow. And at this point in time, staff has identified the attached records that are permitted to be destroyed. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 2114 for the destruction of these records. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver on destroying billing stubs, billing journals?
Destruction
billing stubs?
as laid out by state law, following
Correct.
state law.
And a big bonfire.
Is there a motion on the floor to approve Resolution 2114, authorizing the destruction of certain records?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Resolution 21-14, authorizing the destruction of certain records as presented by Mr. Weaver.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Zimis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Navarro. Any further discussion? I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Knoll, Township reports. Are you ready?
I am.
You excited?
Yeah. Can you tell?
I can tell the excitement.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'll be brief tonight. The only thing I'm going to highlight in addition to my report here is just in this eastern Lingelstown area, at this point, Dolly continues to try to get as many roads base paved here before winter, before the asphalt plants close. So just to make a note that, at times it probably seems like organized chaos, but there is, that goal in mind to get that Locust, Catherine, Pine, Blue Ribbon, and then of course Ball Phaser, at least base paved. So you have my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What is that date? Like when do they start closing those down? I mean, we're gonna have a very warm winter, no snow.
Oh, that's
But
great.
what is that time frame?
It really depends. I mean, we've had years where we're still getting hot mix and paving around Christmas time. It just really depends on the weather and how much demand they have to keep those plants open.
Do you know something about the weather that we don't, Mr. Navarro?
I just know it's on record.
Just hope whoever's in charge of running the plow operation, does a good job, wherever that is.
Assuming they know how to do that.
Salt prices the way they are, we can't have any snow this winter.
Yeah, it's $75 a ton this year.
It's crazy. All right. I guess there's nothing to approve for your report, so let's move right on to the stormwater fund. First item of business is the 2022 stormwater fund budget. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's my pleasure to present to you the 2022 Stormwater Fund budget. In typical fashion, again, I will highlight items that have changed since August, which are very few. The revenues have not changed. We are projecting $3,385,251. Management reimbursement, again, has changed slightly with Sam and Jada and Brittany adding their comments. Management reimbursement sewer, I'll just highlight this very quickly. I was glad to hear that Sam agreed with me that we could take money from our capital improvements from our staff out of capital money because, in his opinion, that is a appropriate capital expenditure. This is crucial because in order to save money over the next 20 years and replace portions of your stormwater system, our thoughts are to use our own staff, but we could take their payroll and their expenses out of the capital improvement fund, which is bond money, so you don't have to raise rates every year to pay for that payroll expense. So that's my only note that I wanted to point out. If you see there that $252,000, which represents that payroll, will come out of the capital fund. Other than that, board members, there were no changes from what we have provided to you in August. I apologize. One other change. Under debt service, we did have to add in a 2022 interest payment of $160,000, which increased the total debt for 2022 to $734,800. Total expenses, $2,481,832. I just want to briefly touch on the debt service. We met with Susquehanna Financial Advisors. We are going to run out of capital money next year. And when we run out of capital money, you have to, again, borrow at some point right before that last expenditure, which would be in October next year. Jay and John do not recommend that. They pretty much sort of how Mr. Navarro can predict the weather, they can predict that rates are going to go up. So they are basically going to come to the board in January and say, hey, guys, we recommend that you start this process now. So we plan on having Jay and John invited to do a presentation to the board to explain to you why that's a wise decision. Of course, I think staff and Sam, you agree as well, right? So you borrow the money earlier, and that takes the risk of losing on higher interest payments when you know you have to borrow the money anyway. So we will be presenting that. So the total, again, revenues, $3,385,251. Total expenditures, $2,461,632. Excuse me. Capital expenditures, again, no changes there since the last meeting. Total capital expenditures, $5,694,902.
Okay.
So at this point, again, typical fashion, I just want to go over, we do not propose a rate increase for 2022, but I do want the board's concurrence after they review our rate table.
That's a lot of paper.
Somebody's been busy on a copy machine. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bill, where did the 160,000 interest come from?
That came from John Hewlett from Susquehanna Advisors Group. That is a calculation of making two payments in 2022. One payment for 6 months. So our payments come out sort of odd. We get basically payment requests for April 1st and October 1st. So when we borrow, they want to settle in April or May. So you'll miss that April payment requirement, but in your October payment, you're going to have to pay for 6 months of interest, and that's what he calculated that amount to be. Board members, the stormwater fee rate analysis was prepared by Tim and I originally a few years ago and has been updated year to year based on current operation revenues and expenses. There's really been no change in what we have been doing with this table. The first 2 pages in green basically show what your rates are projected to be. Again, same philosophy as sewer. Board directive, keep rate increases at 3 to 4%, keep your target reserve at 25%. We were able to do that and keep the rate at the established 104 by the board up through 2025. In 2026, you can see you will be required to raise your rates at 4% to $108. And as you go out all the way to 2039, you can see that you're still meeting your target reserve. Unfortunately, in 2025, you will have to, 2026, start raising rates again. And this, again, take the opportunity again where this is why I believe it's important. Brad's comment was correct, is we should start looking at these holistically so we can maybe work with John and Sam and staff and figure out a way that we can present something to the board that makes sense, that you may not want to increase both fees at the same time. Of course, that's at your pleasure. So you can see that, again, in 2022, no rate increase, and we meet the board's directive for target reserve, and the rate will projected to go up 4% in 2026. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver? Looks like it's pretty straightforward. Again, no rate increase projected for 2022 and for the next couple of years going forward.
Correct.
You're telling us that our financial advisors will be coming before us in January with the thoughts of borrowing now because of the lower interest rates, which makes total sense.
Yes.
Since we're going to have to borrow the money anyways. So
And
we'll
that's
just wait to January on that.
reflected in, I apologize, that is reflected in your rate if you page down, or keep going, yep. Right there, yes, $12 million. Tim had factored in the $12 million, and you can see your debt going up to $1.2 million for the debt service. So basically, we have factored in over a 10-year period doing 3 different bond issues of $12 million each.
Okay.
So it's in your rate schedule.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, then staff recommends a motion by the board to approve the 2022 Stormwater Fund budget as presented.
Any questions, any further questions for Mr. Weaver? Hearing none. Is there a motion on the floor to approve the 2022 Stormwater Fund budget?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the 2022 Stormwater Fund budget as presented.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Judd. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Navarro. Any further discussion? Hearing none. I think we should do this by roll call vote there, Ms. Smith.
Aye.
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 Aye. 2022 Stormwater Fund budget is approved. The rate is $104 for the year, which is very nice. So, okay. Let's go on to Resolution 21-1501 through 08, authorizing condemnation of storm sewer easements in the BC 7-8 project.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Of course, you've seen this resolution plenty of occasions. These are late additions to the BC7 project, which are ready to advertise next week and open bids on January 13th, 2022. HRG has identified these 8 additional easements as necessary stormwater improvements as part of that project. That we did have 3 people sign today and yesterday, so I apologize, but I'm going to pass out a revised list of resolutions to approve tonight. There's only 5 of them now because I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that 3 other people had signed. So I'm going to pass out the 5 resolutions that staff is recommending for approval.
You were busy with the copier.
Thank you, sir.
I have it.
Save
Give
those
it to me.
trees.
Okay.
So board members, as you're aware, as background, this resolution will disauthorize the manager and the solicitor to negotiate the easement. And if a negotiation fails, then it gives the solicitor authorization to proceed with condemnation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Weaver? Hearing none. Is there a motion on the floor to approve resolutions 21-1501 through 05 as presented to you?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve resolutions 2021-1501 through 2021-1505, authorizing condemnation of storm sewer easements in the BC 7-8 project.
Okay. Ms. Lindsay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. Any further discussion?
I just had one question, Bill.
Yes.
How often do you notify them before you go to the easement? Did they just get one letter?
We give them a 30-day letter to sign within 30 days, and if they don't, then we send them another letter giving them another 30 days.
Wow, okay.
And then if they don't respond in that period, then Steve proceeds with the
I was
condemnation.
just curious. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. All right, we got a motion on the floor and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I think we do this by voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right. On to township reports. The first one is update on DEP MS4 permit projects. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, as you recall on Road Tour, we did not get a chance to take you out to the 2 Paxton Creek watershed sedimentation reduction projects that are being conducted with our municipal partnership. We are partners with Susquehanna and CRW. We also partner with PennDOT at a substantial savings. PennDOT is the contractor, PennDOT is the agency that contracted RES. RES has completed these 2 projects already in unbelievable speed. It took them about 35 days to do each of these. So I just wanted to provide photos to the board. If you open up that first document there, Mr. Chairman, you'll see the photos of the,
Which one? Right down here, project status update?
yeah, that's it. And then scroll down, that first one right there is Pine, that's
beautiful
behind
colored
the Pine
pictures.
Apartments off of Progress Avenue. So they did this stream restoration project again in 35 days. And that is basically the final product. Basically, what they do is what they engineers call, and Tim can certainly provide a better description, but they dissipate the energy, reduce the energy, so you reduce the channel erosion, and that you can see how they did that by spreading out and planting. What do they call those plantings, Tim?
They're live stakes.
Live stakes,
typically.
thank you.
Yeah.
So all these are the after photo?
Excuse me?
All these are after photos?
Yes. I have about
Yeah, looks good, doesn't it?
150 before photos I can email you, but I didn't want to bore the board with all the photos. And if you page all the way down, Mr. Chairman, the other project is called Shut Mill Park, and keep going down.
That's it.
The separate-
There's another
separate
attachment. I'm sorry.
one. Yeah, separate
It's a
one.
separate one. Go down. Yep, right there. If the board is familiar with Crumbs Mill Road and Shut Mill Park in Susquehanna, that was the other project. And so you can see the bedding there, Mr. Judd, where that's sort of like in process before the final stabilization, and the next one shows the actual construction happening. So very impressed with Rez and the speed that these people can move dirt and do these projects. They're very highly skilled labor. That concludes my report on the PennDOT projects. If there's no other questions, I will move on to Stonebridge and the other report.
Sure. Why don't you do
Stonebridge, board members, we did report, or HRG reported at our last meeting, that we did award a contract to Township to Flyway, and they are scheduled to start in January, February 2022. They have some concerns about meeting the deadlines. The deadline is June because that's when our grant, the township grant, expires. However, under the first pay applications, we can satisfy the $275,000 grant. So HRG and staff do not see that as a problem. We expect to see some activity starting in January. The Stonebridge property manager was very cooperative. She attended the meeting, the pre-construction meeting, and no other thing to report, that it's just progressing on schedule. I'll be happy to answer any questions on Stonebridge.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver on Stonebridge?
If none, board members, then my final report is, this is our first, all the way down, there's our first joint PRP report to DEP. So you have a 5-year permit. This is the first year that we completed. And this is what your report will look like every year. And this was not prepared by me. It's very technical in nature. CRW has a full-time employee, Claire, and you have your engineer, HRG, Aaron Latavik. Those two talented people prepared this report. It is very complex and very detailed about the sedimentation projects and what DEP wants to see in these reports. Randy's also involved. There's a lot of photographs that have to be taken for documentation. Essentially, I'm sure what the board is concerned about, how are we doing on compliance and schedule, and I'm happy to report we're way ahead of schedule. The total 1.6 million pounds, we're already over 50%, we're about 900,000. You can see, if you scroll all the way down, you can see those totals. Essentially, we're ahead of schedule, and we project that it's on page 9, Mr. Chairman. Yep,
It is
right there.
page 9.
You can see we're at 60% complete and 40% remaining. So that 40%, we're going to have to do a joint project at some point or somehow partner with PennDOT again over the next 3 years. They do take a long time to design a permit, so if we can't partner with PennDOT, I will be reaching out with Susquehanna and CRW, encouraging them to do a joint bid with us.
Okay.
That's my report. I'll be happy to answer questions on the joint PRP.
You know what, Mr. Weaver? It was so well done. There's no questions.
Thank you.
All right, so we are at the end of our agenda. Started out with high excitement, and now there's nobody left in the audience. We bored them to death, and they left.
I know, sad.
Great.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, I apologize. I did want to bring last thing, attention to the board. At the chairman's request, I have got new proposals that you'll see in January when you appoint the engineers for HRG and GHD. Mr. Blaine asked the question, as you've noticed, we don't have any engineers here tonight. And Mr. Blaine was asking why we have to have him all the time. I reached out to HRG and GHD, and in typical fashion, they agreed with the chairman and that they don't always go to authority meetings, and that's at the board's pleasure. So it's staff's recommendation that we will have the engineer present when there's items on the agenda that staff feels we need engineer advice for the board. Tonight, we did not need that, so I just forgot. I wanted to mention to the board, moving forward in 2022, the engineers will be attending at the board's pleasure and as recommended by staff.
Yeah, Bill and I discussed this. To me, it just didn't make any sense to have the engineers here if we're not going to have anything that requires our consulting engineers to report on. So, I mean, I think it's important that they are here when need be, but tonight did not appear to be an issue where we needed them here, so it didn't make any sense to spend the couple $100 that we would be paying them for hourly rates to show up. So I just figured it's
And kudos to GHD. One last thing, they did agree to give us a credit for
$325
$325 for the next 2 meetings. So we're getting a credit on our next bill for $650.
Okay. All right, here we are at adjournment. Is there any further comments by anybody? Before we adjourn, I'll just say happy Thanksgiving to those out in TV land. Happy Thanksgiving to my fellow board members. Happy Thanksgiving to staff. Okay, we will not be meeting in December, so happy holidays as well to everybody if we don't see each other between now and then. Our next meeting is scheduled to be the 4th Tuesday of January, which would be January 25th, 2022. That meeting will be at 7 p.m. right here at this location. We will be reorganizing that night as well as dealing with any business that transpires over the next 2 months. Is there any other comments? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned. Thank you.